The sun in Kisumu rises gently, spreading a warm glow across the lake and the small houses that surround it. Amina steps out with a bucket in her hand, her scarf loosely tied, ready to fetch water before beginning her day. She has lived here all her life, in the same house her late father built with his own hands. To many, it is just an old house with fading paint and creaking doors, but to her, it is the only treasure she truly values. Every corner holds a memory of her father's voice, his laughter, his wisdom. This house is more than walls and a roof. It is her shield, her history, her heart. Life is not easy for Amina. She works long hours at a shop in town, selling clothes and small items just to keep food on the table. Sometimes she comes home so tired she can hardly lift her arms to cook, but she never complains. When the world outside feels heavy, she finds comfort in stepping through her gate, knowing that here she belongs. She sweeps the compound herself, tends to the small garden, and patches up what breaks, even if she has to learn the work on her own. Neighbors may see her as just another struggling woman, but she walks with quiet pride. She knows she doesn't have riches, but she has something they cannot measure, a place she can call home. In her father's house, she feels his spirit watching over her, reminding her that she is not alone. It was a hot afternoon when Amina first saw her stepmother standing at the gate. Mama Zawadi was not the kind of woman who ever walked quietly. She carried herself with the kind of pride that filled the air before she even spoke. Her bright wrapper swayed as she stood there, chin lifted high, knocking at the wooden gate like she already owned what was inside. Amina froze for a moment, her hands still dusty from sweeping the compound. The sight of this woman, after so many years of silence, felt like a storm creeping into her calm life. Without even greeting, Mama Zawadi pushed the gate open and walked in as if it was her rightful ground. Her eyes roamed over the compound, pausing at the house, the same house that Amina guarded like her soul. "So this is where you've been hiding," she said, her voice sharp, carrying across the walls and into the ears of the neighbors who were already peeking from their windows. "This house belongs to me. Your father built it for me and my children, not for you alone." The words landed heavy like stones. Amina's chest tightened, but she stood her ground, clutching the broom in her hand like it might give her strength. She wanted to speak, to shout, but her voice felt trapped inside her. Mama Zawadi walked around, touching the walls, the door, even sitting on the old wooden chair in the shade, like she was testing her throne. Every move was deliberate, meant to show Amina who now held the power. The neighbors began to gather slowly, pretending to pass by but staying close enough to hear every word. In Kisumu, news travels faster than the wind, and nothing spreads quicker than family drama. Whispers rose among them. "Is that not her stepmother? What is she doing here after so long?" Another voice answered, She has come for the house. You wait and see." Amina felt the heat of shame burning her face. She hated that her private wound was now becoming a public show. But she also knew she could not allow this woman to crush her spirit. Taking a deep breath, she finally spoke, her voice steady though her hands trembled. "This is my father's house. He left it to me. You cannot just walk in and claim it." Mama Zawadi laughed, a laugh filled with scorn. "Your father was my husband. Without me, there would be no house. You think a mere girl like you can stand against me." Her words sliced through the air, leaving the neighbors silent, waiting, almost hungry for what would happen next. For the first time, Amina realized this was not just a family argument. This was a battle for dignity, and the whole community was now watching, waiting to see who would bend and who would rise. The first lockout happened on a Thursday, a day Amina would never forget. She had gone to work early that morning, as always, leaving the compound swept and her small garden watered. The sky was clear, and she carried with her the usual hope that maybe sales at the shop would be better than the day before. She had no idea that behind her back, Mama Zawadi was already plotting her humiliation. By mid-morning, Mama Zawadi arrived at the house with a locksmith, a wiry man carrying a box of tools. Neighbors watched from their doorsteps as she barked instructions. "Remove these locks. Put new ones. This house is mine now," she ordered, her voice ringing with authority. The locksmith, perhaps afraid to question her, obeyed. Within an hour, the locks that Amina had trusted for years were gone, replaced by shiny new ones. But Mama Zawadi didn't stop there. She dragged Amina's belongings outside, her mattress, her clothes folded in plastic bags, her old safurias, even the little stool her father once carved for her. Everything was thrown into the dust like it had no meaning. By the time afternoon came, the compound looked like a market stall of broken memory. Neighbors gathered in small groups, whispering, some shaking their heads in pity, others giggling behind their hands. When Amina returned from work, carrying a small bag of vegetables she had bought on her way, the sight before her stopped her heart. Her belongings lay scattered, some already soaked by the sudden Kisumu rain that had begun to fall. She dropped the vegetables, rushing forward in disbelief. She pulled at the new lock on the door, her hands trembling, but it refused to open. She pounded on it, calling out her father's name as if he could still answer. The rain grew heavier, plastering her clothes to her skin, mixing with the tears that refused to stop. She knelt beside her mattress, now damp and muddy, and for the first time in many years, she broke down completely. Her body shook with sobs, not only for the loss of her home, but for the cruelty of being stripped of dignity in front of everyone. Children peeked from behind fences, and women whispered louder now. She has been thrown out, poor thing. But even in her despair, something inside her refused to die. As she sat in the rain, hugging her soaked clothes to her chest, a quiet voice rose within her. Her father's voice, the one that always told her, "Never give up, my daughter." She wiped her tears with the back of her hand, her face set with new resolve. The house might have been locked against her, but her spirit was not locked out. Looking at the gate, she whispered to herself, "This is not the end. I will not give up. This is still my home." By the next morning, the whole market knew about Amina's humiliation. In Kisumu, gossip moves faster than boda-bodas on the main road, and her story had already become the freshest topic. As Amina walked through the market with her basket, she could feel the stares pressing against her back. The women selling tomatoes and onions lowered their voices when she passed, but not low enough. She caught every word. "Have you heard? Mama Zawadi has thrown her out." "Imagine, her own stepmother," one woman said while arranging Sukuma wiki. I saw her things lying outside in the rain. "The mattress was dripping like a rag," another added, clicking her tongue in fake sympathy. Some laughed softly, hiding behind piles of bananas, enjoying the scandal like a juicy story in the evening news. Others wore long faces, shaking their heads as if they carried her pain. But even their pity felt heavy, because it reminded her that she had been seen, exposed, and made small in front of everyone. Amina kept her eyes down, pretending not to hear, though every word stabbed deeper than the last. She wanted to walk faster, but her legs felt slow, almost stubborn, forcing her to carry the shame longer. One woman whispered loudly, "How can she allow such a thing? If it were me, I would have fought." The others giggled, agreeing, painting Amina as weak, a woman with no strength to defend her own root. What hurt most was that even people who once respected her now joined the whispers. Neighbors who had eaten from her garden, who had sat in her compound on hot afternoons, now shook their heads and spoke, as though she was a stranger who had failed life's test. Children, too, had picked up the story, running around chanting, "Amina has no house. Amina has no house." Their laughter was sharp, echoing in her ears long after she passed. Yet, in the middle of the cruelty, there were a few who looked at her differently. A quiet old woman selling groundnuts called her close and pressed a small paper bag of nuts into her hand without saying a word. Her eyes were soft, carrying the weight of understanding. Another vendor told her gently, "My daughter, people talk because they have mouths. Don't let them kill your heart." These small acts of kindness lit tiny sparks inside Amina's storm of shame. Still, the damage was done. Her life was no longer private. Every move she made, every expression on her face, was now watched and judged. The market had turned into a stage, and she was the unwilling actress in a play everyone loved to discuss. Some came to buy vegetables not just for food, but for the chance to hear the latest twist in Amina's downfall. As she carried her basket home that day, her face straight and unreadable, she felt the weight of the whole town on her shoulders. They thought she was broken. They thought she was finished. But deep inside, Amina told herself, "Let them talk. One day, these same mouths will speak a different story." That night, after another long day of whispers and heavy stares, Amina sat quietly with her few salvaged belongings beside her. The house stood only a few feet away, yet it felt like a mountain between her and her peace. The rain had stopped, and the night air was cool, but inside her chest a storm still raged. She lay her head on her damp mattress and closed her eyes, trying to block out the world. That was when her memory carried her back to a moment she had almost forgotten. She saw her father's face, gentle, lined with age, but always full of love. It was years ago, one late evening when the sun was sliding into the lake. He had called her quietly into his bedroom, away from the noise of the compound. She remembered how serious he looked that day, holding a small iron key in his hand. "Amina," he said, his voice low but steady, "there will come a time when people will try to take what is yours. They may come with anger, with tricks, even with force. But don't fight with fists. Fists break, but wisdom lasts." He placed the key in her palm, closing her fingers around it. "This is the master key. It opens the original lock system of this house. I installed it myself, and only you and I know about it. One day, this key will protect you when words are not enough. Keep it safe and keep it secret." Amina had been young then, barely understanding the weight of his word. She had hidden the key carefully inside the lining of an old cloth bag, where it had slept for years untouched, forgotten. Until now, as the memory faded, her heart grew warmer. She reached for the small bag she had carried from the house before Mama Zawadi's invasion. Her hands trembled as she searched inside, beneath old receipts and folded wrappers, until her fingers brushed against cold iron. There it was, the master key, shining faintly under the moonlight. A smile spread across her face, soft but powerful. For the first time since the lockout, she did not feel powerless. The house might have new locks, but her father's wisdom had given her something stronger than any locksmith could create. She pressed the key to her chest, whispering into the night, "Baba, you knew. You always knew." The neighbors who had mocked her would never imagine she held such a secret. Mama Zawadi, sitting smugly inside the house, had no idea that the real key to victory was already in Amina's hand. And Amina would not rush. She would not act in anger. Just as her father taught her, she would wait, plan, and use wisdom to reclaim what was hers. With the key hidden once again, she lay back on her mattress. The shame of the market, the laughter of the neighbors, the cruelty of her stepmother, they all seemed smaller now. For the first time in days, she closed her eyes with a quiet smile. The battle was not over, but she already knew how it would end. A week later, Mama Zawadi decided that humiliating Amina once was not enough. She wanted to prove to everyone that she was now the queen of the house. So she planned a feast. From morning, neighbors could hear the sound of Safuria's banging, meat sizzling, and women's laughter spilling out of the compound. Goats were slaughtered, music played from a hired speaker, and the smell of pulao and fried fish drifted into every corner of the village. People came dressed in their best, eager not only for the food but also for the drama. Mama Zawadi stood in the middle of it all, wrapped in a new kitenge, her headscarf tied high like a crown. She moved around proudly, telling everyone, "This is my home now. My husband built it for me. I am simply taking my rightful place." Each word was loud enough to carry over the fence, reaching those who hadn't even entered the gate. She made sure her victory looked complete. By late afternoon, Amina returned from town, her feet dragging from another long day. As she approached the gate, the noise grew louder. She stopped, confused, then pushed the gate slightly open. What she saw made her heart sink. Strangers filled her compound, eating, drinking, and laughing, while her stepmother held court in the very chair her father used to sit on. The walls of her home, once filled with her quiet prayers, now echoed with songs and mockery. The moment Amina stepped inside, the laughter fell silent for a second, then rose again, sharper. People stared at her as if she were an intruder. A man near the door shouted, Look who has come! The guest of honor who owns nothing." The crowd roared with laughter. Mama Zawadi did not miss her chance. She stood up, holding a glass of soda, her smile cruel. "Amina," she said loudly, "why are you here? This house is not yours. You have no place here. Go back to where you belong." Her words were clear, meant for every ear in the crowd. The guests nodded, some laughing, some whispering, enjoying the spectacle. Amina felt her throat tighten, but she did not reply. She looked around at the faces, neighbors who once came to her for help, people who once ate from her garden, now laughing at her downfall. She felt like the whole world was pressing against her chest. But instead of shouting or crying, she did something none of them expected. She turned, adjusted the small bag on her shoulder, and walked out silently. The silence of her steps was louder than any words she could have spoken. People watched her go, some with smirks, others with unease, as if her calmness carried a secret they could not read. Mama Zawadi laughed louder, raising her glass again, but a few in the crowd whispered. She didn't fight, she just walked away. Why? That night, as the music continued in the house, Amina's silence became the seed of suspense. Nobody knew she held the master key. Nobody knew the story was far from over. That night, when the last song faded and the drunken laughter turned into snores, silence finally returned to the compound. The feast was over, and the guests had left, but a few still lay on the floor inside, sleeping off their food and drink. The house that once belonged to her father now smelled of smoke, spilled beer, and greasy meat. To everyone, it looked like Mama Zawadi's victory was complete. But outside the gate, under the quiet night sky, Amina stood waiting. The moonlight brushed her face, and in her hand, hidden deep in her pocket, was the master key. Her father's gift, her secret weapon. She listened for a while, dogs barking in the distance, crickets singing, the heavy snores from inside the house. Her heart pounded, but her eyes held steady. She knew this was the moment he had prepared her for. Step by step, she moved toward the door. The compound was still messy from the celebration. Plastic cups scattered, bones thrown carelessly in the corner, an empty bottle rolling slightly in the wind. She stopped at the main door, the very one Mama Zawadi had locked so proudly. For a second, her hand hesitated. She could almost hear her father's voice again. "Don't fight with fists, my daughter. Fight with wisdom." With slow, careful hands, she pulled out the master key. It felt heavy not in weight but in meaning. She slid it into the old, hidden lock system that no one else knew about. The sound of the key turning was soft but powerful, like the quiet thunder of justice. Click! The lock opened, as if welcoming her back home. She pushed the door gently. It creaked, the same familiar sound she had grown up with. She stepped inside, her bare feet brushing against the floor she had swept for years. The house was dark, lit only by the moonlight sneaking through the windows. On the floor, a few drunk guests shifted in their sleep, unaware that the rightful owner had returned. Amina walked slowly, touching the walls, the furniture, breathing in deeply. It was still her father's house, no matter how many times they had tried to erase her from it. She whispered softly, "I'm home, Baba." When she reached the center of the room, she pulled the key from the door and held it tight in her hand. At that moment, it wasn't just about a lock or a house. It was about dignity, about justice, about a daughter protecting her father's legacy. Outside, the world slept. Inside, Amina reclaimed what was hers without a fight, without a word, only with wisdom. As she locked the door again from the inside, her lips curved into a quiet smile. Nobody outside knew yet. Nobody imagined the twist of power that had just taken place. Tomorrow would bring shock, gossip, and noise, but tonight belonged to her. In the silence, Amina had taken back her house, her pride, and her story. The morning sun rose slowly over Kisumu, painting the lake gold and warming the rooftops. Inside the house, Amina was already awake, sitting quietly, her documents neatly placed on the table beside her. She had barely slept, but her heart was steady. Today was the day the truth would walk into the light. Outside, Mama Zawadi stepped out proudly, still glowing from the feast of the previous night. She tied her headscarf tighter, humming a tune as she walked to the front door. She reached for the shiny new locks she had paid for, rattled them, and frowned. The door refused to open. She tried again, pulling harder this time. Nothing. Confused, she turned the key, but the lock did not respond. Her humming stopped. She knocked, then pushed, then banged. Still nothing. A few neighbors, already sweeping their compounds, paused to watch. Curiosity spread quickly, and within minutes, people began gathering near the fence. Whispers rose in the air. What's happening? Why can't she open her own door? Then slowly, the door creaked open from the inside. Out stepped Amina. Her clothes were simple but clean, her headscarf neatly tied, her back straight like a queen returning to her throne. She carried no anger on her face, only calm strength. In one hand, she held the documents her father had left her, the will, the papers, the proof. In the other, she held the master key, small but shining in the sunlight. The crowd gasped. Mama Zawadi's eyes widened. How did you? She stammered, but her voice cracked before she could finish. Amina looked at her stepmother, then at the neighbors who had gathered in dozens now, their eyes fixed on her. She spoke clearly, her voice steady enough for all to hear. This is my father's house. He left it to me, and here are the papers to prove it. No one, not even you, can erase that truth. She raised the documents for everyone to see. The crowd murmured louder now, shifting sides as fast as gossip moved. Yesterday they had laughed at her. Today they watched her with new eyes. Some nodded in agreement, others clapped softly, and a few even whispered, she is strong, she is wise. Mama Zawadi's face twisted with anger and disbelief. She rattled the lock again, as if the metal itself had betrayed her. This is a trick, she shouted, but her voice no longer carried the same power. The neighbors were no longer on her side. Their eyes were fixed on Amina, the woman they had mocked, now standing tall with proof in her hands. Amina did not raise her voice. She did not insult or argue. She simply stepped aside, pointing at the door now locked in her control. You can try all you want, Mama Zawadi, but this house will never answer to you. It knows its rightful owner. The silence that followed was heavy, filled with respect and shock. For the first time, the tables had turned. The crowd saw not a weak woman, but a daughter guarding her father's legacy. And Mama Zawadi, once so proud, now stood powerless before everyone. The matter did not end at the gate. Word spread quickly that the fight for the house had now reached the local elders and later, the small court that handled family disputes. On the appointed day, people gathered early, filling the compound of the chief's office. Men leaned on their walking sticks, women whispered behind their lessos, and children ran about, curious to see how the drama would unfold. It was more than a case now. It was entertainment, a story everyone had been following like a live show. Mama Zawadi arrived first, dressed in a flashy kitenge, her face painted with forced confidence. She walked with a bold step, surrounded by a few supporters who whispered loudly about her being the true wife and rightful heir. She carried herself as though the victory was already in her hands. Then Amina appeared. Her clothes were plain, but she walked with quiet dignity, holding a brown envelope under her arm. She was not alone. Two elderly neighbors who had known her father since childhood walked beside her. Their presence spoke louder than words. She had witnesses. The crowd turned their heads, whispers rippling like wind through dry grass. The elders sat in a circle, their walking sticks planted firmly on the ground, while the chief presided at the center. Both women were asked to present their claims. Mama Zawadi spoke first, her voice high and dramatic. "This house belongs to me. I was the wife. Without me, there would be no home. This girl has no right to push me out." She gestured angrily toward Amina, her words sharp but thin, like a drum with no rhythm. When her turn came, Amina stood calmly. She opened her envelope and laid out the papers. Her father's will, signed and stamped, the house documents in her name, and finally, the small iron key that glinted in the sun. The master key. Gasps filled the crowd. She held it up for everyone to see and said, "My father gave me this himself. He told me to protect what he built. He left this house to me, and here is the proof." The witnesses stepped forward. One old man cleared his throat and said, "I was there the day her father spoke of this key. He trusted his daughter. He wanted her to be safe. We all knew this was her house." Another woman added, "We have seen her live there alone for years, working, struggling, keeping the place alive. No one else." The elders nodded, their faces grave. After a short discussion, the chief spoke firmly. "The evidence is clear. The will, the witnesses, and even the key all show that the house belongs to Amina. Mama Zawadi, you have no right to claim it." The crowd erupted in whispers, some clapping softly, others laughing at the sudden twist. Mama Zawadi's face darkened. She tried to protest, but her words were drowned out by the murmurs. The same people who once mocked Amina now shook their heads at her stepmother. For Amina, it was not just victory, it was justice. She stood tall in front of everyone, the shame of the past weeks melting away. The same crowd that had once enjoyed her humiliation now watched her with respect. This time, the story was different. The house that once stood as a battlefield slowly turned into a place of healing. Amina scrubbed the floors, repainted the cracked walls, and repaired the broken roof with her own hands. Each stroke of paint felt like wiping away the shame she had endured. Neighbors who had once mocked her now stopped by to admire the changes. Some offered small help, bringing nails, timber, or even just words of encouragement. The same compound that had been filled with gossip and humiliation now carried laughter and hope. But Amina did not rebuild the house just for herself. She remembered the lonely nights she had slept outside in the rain, and her heart thought of other girls who faced the same pain. So she opened one section of the house as a shelter for abandoned and homeless girls. She placed extra mattresses in the rooms, cooked meals for them, and told them, "This is your home too." The girls, once shy and broken, began to smile again, their voices filling the air with songs and chatter. The community could not ignore it. The same people who once called her weak now praised her strength. Women in the market spoke proudly of her, saying, "Amina has turned her suffering into something greater." Men nodded with respect, admitting, "She carried her father's wisdom well." Even the children who had mocked her now ran into her compound to play, calling her Mama Amina. Her story spread beyond the village, shared from mouth to mouth, post to post. And at the heart of it was the lesson her father had whispered years ago. The master key was never just for a door. It was a symbol. The key to dignity, Amina would say with a quiet smile, is never in their hands. It's always in yours.